I don't really know why I'm writing this like a confession, but it feels easier to tell strangers than people who actually know me. Maybe because strangers won't interrupt and say what I should have done. They'll just listen or read. So this is me, telling it from the beginning. Before everything went wrong. Before I stopped recognizing myself. I was married to Mark for 11 years. That sounds solid when you say it out loud. 11 years is supposed to mean something. Stability, history, effort. What it actually meant was that we knew how to move around each other without touching. We knew how to avoid the hard conversations. We knew which topics would end a night early. Mark wasn't a bad man. I need to say that up front. He didn't cheat, didn't yell, didn't disappear for days. He worked. A lot. He came home tired. He ate whatever I cooked or picked up. He watched TV until he fell asleep. That was our rhythm. I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that marriages go through dry spells, that real life isn't supposed to feel exciting. But there's a difference between calm and empty, and I was living in empty. One night, about a year before everything collapsed, I tried to talk to him. We were sitting at the kitchen table, plates already pushed aside. "Do you ever feel like we don't really talk anymore?" I asked. He sighed, not angrily, just tired. "Emily, I talk all day at work. Can we not do this tonight?" That sentence followed me for months. Can we not do this tonight? Tonight turned into weeks, then seasons. I started filling the silence with routines. Gym in the mornings, podcasts, calling my sister more often, anything that made the house feel less quiet. I told myself I was working on us by not pushing, by being understanding. I thought that was what saving a marriage looked like. Jason came into the picture in the most unremarkable way possible, which is why I didn't see him as a threat. He was a friend of a friend, someone Mark knew casually from work events. When he showed up at a barbecue we hosted, he brought decent wine and actually helped clean up without being asked. That alone made him memorable. We talked that night. Nothing deep. He asked what I did, what I liked, laughed at my jokes in a way that felt natural. I remember Mark disappearing to check something on his phone, standing alone near the grill, while Jason stayed at the table with me. Later, when everyone left, Mark said, "Jason's getting divorced. Rough situation." I nodded and said something polite, then forgot about it. A few weeks later, Mark mentioned that Jason needed a temporary place to stay. Something about his apartment lease ending sooner than expected. Mark said it like an afterthought, not really asking. "We've got the guest room," he said. "It's just for a bit." I hesitated. Not because I was worried about Jason, but because I was worried about disruption. Our house was quiet, predictable. "How long is a bit?" I asked. "Couple of weeks, maybe a month." I agreed. I told myself it was the decent thing to do, that helping someone out didn't mean anything more. Jason moved in with 2 suitcases and a laptop bag. He was polite to a fault, always asking if it was okay to use the washer, if he could take the last yogurt, if he was being too loud on calls. Mark barely noticed. He left early, came home late. Sometimes he and Jason exchanged a few words in passing, mostly about work. Jason and I ended up sharing the house in the hours Mark wasn't there. Mornings mostly, sometimes late evenings. The first real conversation we had was over coffee. I was half awake, leaning against the counter, and he asked, "Is it always this quiet here?" I laughed. "Pretty much." He didn't say anything for a moment, then said, "That can be nice, or lonely. Depends." I should have shut that down. I didn't. I said, "Yeah, depends." That was it. No flirting, no lines crossed. Just 2 people acknowledging something obvious. But after that, it kept happening. Small moments. He'd ask how my day was and actually wait for the answer. He remembered things I told him. Mark forgot, not out of cruelty, just because he wasn't paying attention anymore. One night, Mark came home late again. I was on the couch, scrolling through my phone, and Jason was at the dining table working on his laptop. Mark kissed my cheek quickly. "Long day," he said, already walking toward the bedroom. I watched him disappear and felt this strange mix of relief and sadness. Jason looked up, clearly uncomfortable. "Sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You're not," I replied. "This is your place too, for now." As soon as I said it, something tightened in my chest. Your place too. I told myself it was just hospitality. That night, lying next to Mark while he slept, I stared at the ceiling and thought about how strange it was that the most connected I felt all day was with a man sleeping in our guest room. I felt guilty for even thinking it, and I pushed it away. I still believed I was doing the right thing. I was patient. I wasn't nagging. I wasn't cheating. I was being a good wife, holding things together quietly. I just didn't realize yet that pretending to save a marriage can sometimes be the first step toward destroying it. After that night, things didn't suddenly change. That's important. There was no dramatic shift, no moment where I woke up and decided to betray my husband. It was slower than that, almost boring in how normal it felt. And that's what scares me now, looking back. Jason stayed longer than planned. 2 weeks turned into a month, then another. Mark never really addressed it. If anything, he seemed relieved not to be alone in the house when he wasn't around. I asked once, casually, "Is it okay that Jason's still here?" And Mark shrugged. "He's not in the way," he said. "And he's gone most of the time anyway." That was Mark's way of saying it didn't matter. And maybe that should have been my warning sign. Jason and I developed a routine without meaning to. Coffee in the mornings if we were both up. Sometimes we'd sit at opposite ends of the kitchen island, sometimes closer, talking about nothing important. Work frustrations, his divorce paperwork, my gym classes, safe topics mostly. One morning he said, "You're really good at listening, you know that?" I smiled, uncomfortable but pleased. "I don't say much." "Yeah," he said. "But you're present. That's rare." I laughed it off, but later that day I realized no one had described me like that in years. Not Mark, not anyone. I started noticing small things. How Jason always looked at me when I spoke, not through me. How he'd pause his music when I walked into the room. How he never checked his phone mid-conversation. None of it was inappropriate. It was just attentive. Mark, meanwhile, felt further away. He was exhausted all the time. If I tried to talk about my day, he'd listen for a minute, then say, "Can we circle back to this later?" Later rarely came. One night, I finally told him, "I feel like we're drifting." He rubbed his face. "Emily, we're fine. We're just busy. You're overthinking it." I wanted to scream that I wasn't overthinking anything, that I was underfeeling, starving, but instead I nodded. "Okay." That same night, Jason and I ended up alone in the kitchen again. Mark had gone to bed early. Jason poured himself a glass of water, then asked, "Are you okay?" I hesitated. "Why?" "You looked upset earlier." I could have lied. I usually did. Instead, I said, "It's just marriage stuff." He didn't push, just said, "Yeah, that stuff can mess with your head." We stood there in silence for a moment. Not awkward silence, comfortable. That was new. I started telling myself I deserved that comfort. That after years of holding things together, it was okay to have someone who noticed me. I still wasn't touching him, still wasn't crossing any obvious lines. That became my internal rule. As long as nothing physical happened, I wasn't doing anything wrong. But emotionally, I was already gone. I caught myself waiting for his footsteps in the morning. Feeling disappointed if he left early. Feeling lighter when he came home before Mark. I hated myself for it, then justified it just as quickly. One evening, Jason suggested we order takeout. "Mark's not home yet, right?" "No," I said. He texted, "Late meeting." We ate on the couch, sitting farther apart than we needed to. We talked about his divorce more openly that night. How quiet his old place had felt. How invisible he'd started to feel in his marriage. At some point, he said, staring at the floor, "I realized I was lonely even when she was sitting right next to me." That hit too close. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that." He looked at me then, really looked at me, not in a hungry way, in a sad, understanding way. My chest felt tight. "You shouldn't feel like that," he said. The sentence stayed with me. "You shouldn't feel like that. Not you are cheating. Not be careful. Just that my loneliness was somehow unfair." That night, after he went to his room, I lay next to Mark and felt miles away from him. I watched his back rise and fall and thought, when did this stop being enough? I started lying after that. Not big lies, small ones that slid out easily. Telling Mark I was tired when really I just didn't want to talk. Saying Jason was out when he was actually upstairs. I told myself I was protecting everyone's peace. Jason and I never discussed boundaries. We didn't need to. We both felt the tension and pretended it wasn't there. Until one night, when we were both a little drunk, sitting on the back porch. The air was cool. The house was quiet. Jason laughed at something I said, then stopped suddenly. "This is dangerous," he said softly. I froze. "What is?" He gestured vaguely between us. "This. The way this feels." I should have ended it right there. Instead, I said, "Nothing's happening." He nodded. "I know, I just wanted to say it out loud." After that, everything felt sharper. Every look lingered too long. Every laugh meant too much. I told myself I was still in control, that acknowledging the danger meant I was being responsible. But control is a funny thing. You think you have it right up until the moment you don't. The first time he touched me, it was accidental. His hand brushed mine when we both reached for the same mug. We both pulled back too quickly, like we'd been burned. "I'm sorry," he said. "It's fine," I replied, my heart racing. We didn't talk about it. But that night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying it, that brief contact, and what terrified me wasn't how wrong it felt. It was how right, how alive. I was still telling myself I was trying to save my marriage. I was just also building something else, quietly, in the same house. Something fragile and secret and selfish. And deep down, I knew that once you start choosing secrecy over honesty, it's only a matter of time before everything breaks. I wish I could say there was a clear moment where I decided to cross the line, but that wouldn't be true. It didn't feel like a decision. It felt like giving up, resisting something that had already taken over my thoughts. After that night on the porch, the tension stopped being subtle. Jason tried to pull back. I could tell. He spent more time in his room, came home later, avoided being alone with me. And instead of feeling relieved, I felt abandoned in my own house. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong with me. One afternoon, Mark texted that he'd be working late again. I stared at the message longer than necessary. Then I put my phone down and went to the guest room. Jason's door was open. He was sitting on the bed with his laptop, headphones around his neck. "Hey," I said. He looked up and smiled, then caught himself and looked away. "Hey." "I feel like you're avoiding me," I said before I could stop myself. He exhaled slowly. "I'm trying to do the right thing." That sentence irritated me more than it should have. "And what exactly is the wrong thing?" I asked. He stood up, pacing a little. "This, whatever this is, we're pretending it's nothing, but it's not." I crossed my arms. "So what? We just stop talking. Pretend we don't live in the same house." "I think we should set some boundaries," he said carefully. I laughed, sharp and defensive. Funny how boundaries only matter when it starts to feel real. He looked at me then, surprised. "Emily." "I feel invisible in my own marriage," I said, my voice shaking. "I feel like I've been doing everything right for years and still ending up alone. And now suddenly I'm supposed to feel guilty because someone actually sees me?" Silence filled the room, heavy, charged. "I see you," he said quietly. "That's the problem." I don't remember who moved first. I just remember standing too close, feeling his breath, feeling like I was standing at the edge of something I'd never be able to undo. When he kissed me, it was hesitant, like he was giving me time to pull away. I didn't. Afterward, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. What I felt was relief. A terrible, calming relief, like something inside me had finally stopped screaming. We didn't say much. He asked, "Are you okay?" I said yes, and I meant it. That scared me more than anything. From that moment on, everything split into two lives, the public one and the private one. Mark noticed the change before he understood it. I was distant but lighter, distracted but calmer. I stopped asking him to talk. I stopped pushing. I think, in a twisted way that made him more suspicious. Jason and I were careful, no obvious touches, no being alone when Mark was home. It was exhausting, the constant awareness, but it also bonded us. We told ourselves we were being respectful. That lie helped us sleep at night. Mark started asking questions. Why is Jason still here? He asked one evening. He's still sorting things out, I said smoothly. You seem different, he said another time. Did I do something? That one almost broke me. No, I said quickly. I'm just tired. The fight happened on a Sunday. Jason was out, supposedly. Mark and I were in the living room. He was quiet in a way that felt intentional. Are you unhappy with me? He asked. I froze. Why would you ask that? Because you're somewhere else, he said. Because you don't look at me anymore. I tried to deflect. We've talked about this. You're never home. That's not an answer, he said, his voice tighter now. Is there someone else? The room went very still. I could have lied. A better liar would have. Instead, I said, it's complicated. His face changed immediately. Is it him? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. You let him live in our house, Mark said slowly. You looked me in the eye every day. You weren't here, I snapped, finally losing control. You checked out years ago. So that makes this okay? He asked. You bring another man into our home? I didn't plan this, I said. It just happened. That's the worst excuse, he said, his voice rising. You didn't trip into bed with him, Emily. We argued for hours. Everything came out. Years of resentment, of feeling unappreciated, of feeling ignored. He accused me of betrayal. I accused him of abandonment. At some point, we were just yelling to hear our own pain reflected back. When Jason came home, the silence was worse than the shouting had been. Mark looked at him and said, Get your things. Jason tried to speak. Mark, Get out, Mark said. Jason looked at me, searching my face. I said nothing. That's something I'll always carry with me. Jason left that night. Mark and I slept in separate rooms after that. A week later, he moved out. There was no dramatic goodbye. Just boxes and quiet and a final look that wasn't angry anymore, just empty. The marriage didn't end because of one mistake. It ended because it had been breaking for years, and I chose the wrong way to admit it. Jason and I didn't become a happy ending. We tried for a while. The guilt, the pressure, the way everything started in secrecy, it poisoned what could have been real. We stopped talking a few months later. Now I live alone in the house that was supposed to mean stability. I don't tell this story because I'm proud of it. I tell it because it's honest. I didn't cheat because I was reckless or cruel. I cheated because I was lonely and afraid and too weak to demand the truth out loud. My marriage didn't survive. There's no rebuilding it. Some things, once broken, don't get repaired. They just teach you what not to ignore next time. A few months after Mark moved out, the house stopped feeling like a crime scene and started feeling like a storage unit for a life that didn't exist anymore. I changed nothing at first. Same couch, same dishes, same side of the bed I slept on even though I was alone now. I think part of me believed that if I didn't rearrange anything, the past might still be reachable. Mark and I spoke only when we had to. Practical messages, paperwork. Who would keep what? The divorce itself wasn't dramatic. No lawyers shouting, no courtroom scenes. Just two adults sitting across from each other in a mediator's office, speaking carefully, like strangers negotiating a business deal. At one point, the mediator asked, Do either of you want to try counseling before proceeding? Mark looked at me, really looked at me, and then shook his head. I don't think there's anything left to save. That hurt more than the yelling ever did, because it meant he wasn't angry anymore. He was done. Jason tried to stay in my life at first. We met for coffee a few times. Each time felt heavier than the last. What we had thrived on secrecy and proximity. Without those, it felt exposed and fragile. One afternoon, he said, "I think we rushed into something without thinking about the damage." I nodded. "I know. We hurt people," he added, not accusing, just stating it. We didn't touch across the table. We didn't make plans. When we hugged goodbye, it felt polite, final. We never officially said it was over, but it was. The silence after that was different. No adrenaline, no guilt-driven closeness. Just quiet. Real quiet. People love asking what I learned, like there's supposed to be a clean lesson wrapped in a bow. The truth is messier. I learned that loneliness can make you dishonest before it makes you brave. That you can justify almost anything if you convince yourself you're surviving. That pretending to be okay is easier than demanding change, until it isn't. I don't paint Mark as a villain anymore. I used to. It made things simpler. But he was just a man who didn't know how to show up emotionally, and I was a woman who didn't know how to walk away when she should have. We failed each other in different ways. Sometimes I replay that moment when he asked, "Is there someone else?" and wonder what would have happened if I'd told the truth sooner. Not about Jason, but about how lonely I was. Maybe nothing would have changed. Maybe everything would have. I'll never know. What I do know is that inviting another man into our home wasn't an accident. It was a choice I made while pretending I wasn't choosing anything at all. That's the part that's hardest to forgive in myself. The divorce was finalized last spring. Mark didn't come to the house to celebrate or grieve or argue. He just picked up the last of his things while I was at work. When I came home, the closet looked bigger, emptier. I don't tell this story to excuse myself. I tell it because it's uncomfortable and real and doesn't fit into neat categories of good and bad. I was wrong. I was also hurting. Both can be true at the same time. If there's a closed ending here, it's this. The marriage is over, permanently. There's no secret hope of reconciliation, no late-night texts, no unfinished sentences, just two separate lives moving forward. And me, learning, slowly, painfully, that saving yourself by destroying something else isn't saving at all.